Alright, welcome to another week for this marvelous tutorial about how to make an anime explosion. And we're going to work with grease pencil on this time. That means we're going to combine the 2D and the 3D aspects in Blender. This is the only application software that I've come to use that also includes a compositor. So whenever you finish your sequence, then you can go on to compositing. By the way, we're going to be using Natron as well. So let's get started. Open up Blender 2.8, the new alpha version. Beta version is about to come in the following weeks. But right now we're going to do a basic shape such as a sphere, and then we're going to duplicate by pressing Shift D, selecting the sphere and then Shift D to duplicate it. I'm going to switch the viewport into the multi-color view so that we can differentiate what elements we have, and then I'm going to select them all and press Ctrl J to join them. And later we're going to place the origin or the center of the object right in the center. This is important because later we will duplicate this with instance groups and also as object particles. So it's very important that you place the pivot point or the origin right in the center. And now we're going to add an edge split modifier, and right after that a smooth modifier. The general idea here is to work with the angles that the mesh is going to be split on. And as you can see, the effect comes right away. We can also mix them with masks or other modifiers to create more advanced effects. But for now, let's just work with the simple setups that we have right here. So as you can see, you can iterate many times on the same modifier and it will do different effects on the end. And the general idea here is to split the edges far enough so that they will appear as to be in a sequence, or rather in a quick smoke simulation on 2D. Now this is the marvelous thing about Blender. You can create these 2D effects and also compose them later on with your 3D scene. Or backwards, you can animate in 2D using the 3D space. This is just amazing, it's mind-blowing. And I really like to work on this software. You already know Blender, and in case you don't, Blender is an open source project held by the Blender Foundation in Amsterdam. And they recently had a Blender conference where you can see a lot of the potential tools you have in this package. And no, there is no fee to subscribe, or there's no fee to acquire this software. It's just download, use, and abuse. I'm sorry, I should say use and publicly share whatever you would like to do in composition. Like in this case, we're preparing the material that is being assigned into this mesh. We're creating a basic ramp characteristic of any anime style cel shading show. And as you can see right here, we need a light source. I'm adjusting some of the parameters here. The emission shader is very important. You can even control the bloom like a real-time engine. I'm sorry, I also forgot. Yes, in Blender 2.8 you do have a real-time engine called Eve, and it will allow you to view your materials without the need of render. What's that you say? You don't need to render to check out the things? Yes, you don't. You actually don't. And this is the beauty about working in this software, is that you can immediately preview the way your animation is going to be created. And right now I'm going to take advantage of the bloom effect on the post effect tab, or rather the render tab, and my bloom effect, it's making things glow very nicely. Now I'm placing this effect over the shaded view. This is the shaded view, and also on the non-shaded view, which in this case represents the scene. So right now if I move this or I move that, you won't see very much changes. That is because we don't have a light. We need to create a light. So to do that, we're going to press Shift A, and then we're going to add a light. Now whenever you open up Blender, you should know that most of the comments here are done through Shift A. Now you of course can go around the interface, but most of the time it's just putting your mouse over the region of your interest and then pressing Shift A, in this case on the 3D view, to create things to allow you to place elements or modify them. Right now I'm showing you how you can animate. You hover the parameter you would like and then press I. With that, a keyframe is going to be created on the timeline, and then you move the timeline scroll bar, the head reproducer on the timeline, and then obviously you go to the parameter of your interest, you tweak it, and then press I again, insert keyframe. And with that, automatically your keyframes are created in the timeline. Now why don't you see them? Because you need to switch your timeline to probably another way of checking out your keyframes, which is through the dope sheet. Now remember, this alpha version of Blender is not finished, and it's probable that you would need to save often so that you do not lose your files or you do not lose your work. So right now I'm applying a smooth shader, a subdivision surface shader, modifier, and basically I like these rough edges just the way they are. I'm very stylistic regarding anime explosions. I don't like that much smoothness. I want a cross product between video game explosions and stylized animation explosions. Some people don't really like the mixing the worlds in 2D and 3D. I don't know why is that, because yes, of course it's a technique, and yes, of course it's a medium, but I don't see anything weird if you would like to mix between plastic or very elastic, very expressive 2D animation plus 3D animation. That's why I'm doing this tutorial for you, so you can see what the different tools you have available on Blender will acquire that kind of effect. Will help you acquire that kind of effects, and that's very good, because you need to explore your options whenever you're working for a studio, and probably you're an effects artist, and then you should do explosions, rain, waterfalls, I don't know, you name it. But it's better to know the entire interface and to know how to move around it. Today is a very busy day outside, so that's why you hear a lot of car noises. Okay, so what we're doing right now is to have the dope sheet on this side and the timeline on the other side, just to view the timing on our effects. So right now I'm creating the effect by tweaking the parameters you see right here on the video. The idea here is to create a puff, explosion, and then dissolve. This looks really nice. Now to add to this, we're going to need to additionally create other transform keyframes, such as the scaling and rotation, because the idea here, it will be like the video games do, which are sometimes scaled effects, like they go from 0 to some kind of size and then they go back to 0 in scale. Now that to some extent will be done in this tutorial. So if you can see all the tools that I'm using, I'm clicking on the interface so you'll know where the scale tool is. I could do all this by typing on the keyboard, and some people who are new to this kind of workflows in Blender, I always tell them to leave behind every other conception of 3D software you had before Blender, because Blender has a set of rules of its own, like a mind of its own. And the original idea, how the creators did this software approach, was either by typing or by doing things with gestures on the mouse. Fortunately, gestures have been left behind to give a more prominent space to pie menus and also to keyboard shortcuts. It's kind of an industrial zone right now outside. Okay, so you can see here I'm scaling the object, and then I press I. Then I select scale and rotate keyframes. I is for insert keyframe. That way, if you have a timeline and you have a dope sheet, then you'll know where your keyframes are. If you don't see them, maybe you can tap here, and then the name of the objects which are transformed appear on the side of the screen. Now let me see. I'm going to switch the viewport to another color. That's better. And this viewport color does not represent the final color what you're going to do or what you're going to get on the render. But as you can see, it's very helpful to switch viewport colors directly from these pop-ups. And this looks pretty sweet. I really like it. Alright, that's basically it. In 8 minutes, under 12 minutes, you already accomplished one basic anime puff and explosion, and it looks good. Now, just like I always tell you, save before anything and everything you do. That's different than the previous step on Blender 2.8 Alpha, because this is not the final release. It's still buggy at some places, but you can mostly use it at your own peace and time. I would say right now the software being away by 2 weeks for the alpha release, I would say that the software right now, as it is, with the features, with the prominent features that it already has, it's stable around probably, I will dare to guess, in around a 77.8%. We're really close to make a lot of the features that are already inside Blender very stable. And the other 30% that is still awaiting to be finished, and I guess it's going to be finished after this year, because many of the developers that already went to the Blender conference and that have a video stream online, they have announced that it's most likely that by the first 3 months in the next year, Blender 2.8 will be a stable, solid release, ready to be used in production. Now, why do they keep telling you this, that this is not to be used in production, in real production, although they are doing, the Spring movie, which looks really awesome. A big congratulations to the team. I mean, they are really pushing this software tool really forward. That has allowed to other studios to get a real taste of what it is to work with advanced tools, in the sense that they don't have to wait for render passes, they don't have to wait for lightning to be calculated. The other day I was talking to a 3D Max user, and he was telling me it's not possible that you get subsurface scatter in real time. I mean, it's just not possible. We only see this on video games, top AAA video games, top AAA studios. And I was telling him, well, you can on Blender, and not only that, you can also simulate smoke, particles, fire, fluids. Well, not that much fluids, but probably cloth on real time. And he was like, no way, I have to see it to believe it. And then I sent him some links, and he was right on the side of Blender by the time. And I hope he really does the decision. He takes the decision to go to Blender. Now, I really have to acknowledge that he works for a 3D printing service, and he does really good job with 3D Studio Max, not to diminish or anything. I mean, it's just a a matter of preferences on tools, but he was really interested in not only doing 3D printing, because if it was possible not to wait for long times for real smoke simulation, fire simulations, particles, subsurface scatter, reflections, and other things, he was really meditating about, going back to what he really loved, which was modeling and creating animations. Or basically he was an ArchiCAD user before, and so he's thinking about going back to how do you call this, house previs, architectural previsualizations. So let's continue with this. Now, as you can see, we are allowed to place groups, instance groups, on the particle emitter. In this case, I'm emitting particles from a torus. And if you saw on the configurations for the particles, I also selected the groups. You need to create this particle as a group. Although it's just one element, it is really helpful to create them in groups. In a group, give it a name so that you can instantiate, and now this is a very common workflow in other 3D packages, to instantiate whatever particle you first define as the object. So you have them right here, and you can also adjust the rotation parameters to randomize some of the explosions. Now I'm going to go little by little here. And with a nice light source, everything looks just right. Look at that. And of course, in real life, whatever explodes, it will have a strong light emission. So in this case, I'm going to adjust the light emission, and also let's see how it looks. Now for our render, we're not going to be using the torus, so you may hide this on the render tab properties. And awesome, you have particle instances and tweak their state and end frames. Look at that beauty, gorgeous. Now the original particle is down here, so you can see what it is doing. And this is how a single explosion looks. Having the light right on the center will give you this kind of effect. Now don't forget, this is the viewport. We're looking at it on real time. Whatever you're seeing through it, this is how your end result will be like. And it's just glorious. I mean, I cannot even describe how many things I can do with this. Right now, this tutorial is a very short taste of what it can be accomplished, not only on the compositing part, but also on the effects part, to the degree I'm considering many other tutorials. So right now, we're going to go into the compositing part, but not before creating yet another one, simulation. Some people have asked me before, what do I do for a living? Well, of course, if I am dedicated in Blender, it's because I have experience with everything related to VFX and 3D animation. And thus my background is to create TV, commercial advertisement, of course, not only with Blender, with every other tool in the market that can accomplish whatever it is that I'm assigned to do in less time as possible. And so, when I put my eyes on Blender, I said, I think this tool has a lot of potentials. And thus, I decided to become a certified trainer from the Blender Foundation. And this is why every Friday, or rather every Thursday, I prepare some of the tutorials for beginner level, middle level, mid-high level, and look at this, gorgeous. looks really good. Now this is how it looks on render time. If you press F12, you're going to get a floating window so that you'll know how your render will look in the final frame. You can also get rid of every overlay by clicking the overlay button, and this is how it will look. Now it's ready to get composite. This is exciting. You can join views by right clicking over the dividing line on the windows and choosing join. And I am also going to do a grease pencil demonstration, very quick grease pencil demonstration, because that's the purpose of this tutorial. So I'm going to switch to my dope sheet and then grease pencil timeline, which is different than the original timeline. And here's how you get it. And also I'm going to add a blank grease pencil object. It doesn't matter where the pivot point or the center is placed right now, because all we really care is to switch my interaction mode after I have selected the grease pencil object to draw mode. In this case, I'm going to rename the grease pencil object, the grease pencil data level object, and also the layer. And right now I'm going to create another layer, and I just switched to the materials tab for grease pencil, which are different than the materials that are regularly used for the 3D objects. Grease pencil materials are very set apart from the other realistic materials, or the other shaders, if you may say. So right now I'm tweaking my environment to be a 2D compositing, or rather 2D animation environment, and I'm going to scroll up to a frame where I can start drawing. This frame number 1, I think it is, frame number 2. I want my explosion to follow these directions. Please do not make any comments about the huge buses outside, because today is a very busy day. I don't have time to edit the audio, it's too long. I'm just glad I can share with you all the properties and all the techniques some of the Blender masters have kindly shared with me as well. I would also like to share with you. By the way, the music credit was very awesome. I mean, just this morning while I was editing this tutorial, I just found the user on Twitter, and he said, well, yes, you can use the music. So thank you very much. Music is credited as well. So we're going to create a new blank keyframe from the stroke menu, only to be available on the draw interaction mode. Now let's go for the keyframe number 3. Let's keep on drawing right here, and let's yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. Let's add another blank keyframe, and in order to draw this keyframe, let me just do a quick doodle right here. All right, we're now going to need the help of the onion skin property, or rather help of the onion skin. How you do that? You come here to the grease pencil layers, activate the onion skinning, and also select what method you would like the onion skin to be drawn on the viewport, and how many frames you want forward and backward. This is how you activate it. And of course you have other parameters here as well as the colors. But then you come here to the overlay pop-up and then select onion skin. And all of this is just available on the draw interaction mode, which is only available if you select the grease pencil object. Don't forget about that, because in Blender you have 21 interaction modes. Yes, jaw drop. It's a very good place to say, what? Anyways, yes, 21 interaction plus some other sub-menu, sub-interaction modes. Blender is a very extensive software, and this is why the Blender Foundation is interested in acquiring, or rather recruiting, more Blender trainers. So if you're excited about Blender, I encourage you to applied for the Blender Foundation official certified trainer um, uh, program, and they are going to ask you some questions about what is your motivation to teach on Blender, or rather to train on Blender. You can be a trainer for enterprises or a individual trainer. There are many modes, and it's a definite if it's a definite help whenever you're working with a studio. Well, in my case, a studio can call me up and then they will ask me how to do certain things, or how possible is to create, I don't know, some certain particle effects on Blender, or the grease pencil object tool, to what extent it could be used for, I don't know, probably storyboarding or creating layouts, first rough layouts for a movie. And I use Blender for most of the things. I know there are some limitations, and I know there are some part of the codes that need to be pretty much fixed. But remember that the Blender Foundation works through your fundings, so make sure to endorse, make sure to back up all what the developers are doing on the Blender Foundation, going through the main page, blender.org, and you can see right there the funds for the developers. It's very important because we all love the software, and if you can give something back, well, the Blender Foundation takes that and distributes it among its many tasks. But another great thing I have to say about Blender is that the NVIDIA industry, how could we say that? Graphics card business industry, better said, it's backing up Blender all the way. And just this past week, there was a news about Intel optimizing some of the lines, some of the code in Blender to create a better experience with the new generation Intel processing, the i9. Yes, you heard that right. Now, if you acquire a machine on this time of the year, or probably by the next year, the Intel Core i9 with 12 plus physical processing, I'm sorry, 24 plus virtual processing will allow you to make Blender renders on cycles even faster. So right now, if you're working on an i7 or an i5, probably a laptop or whatever graphic card you're using, don't worry, because Intel's got you covered for the next year. And so that means that the cycles rendering will be polished to render faster. So right now we're looking at the compositor right here. And of course you will follow all the text that was written on this video. And right now I'm going to divide the screen into my dope sheet. And as you can see, I already have an image sequence node on my compositor running along just as well with the dope sheet. So right now I'm scrubbing the playhead and basic color correction. Now in After Effects, after you do render that, or rather if you take the same sequence, I did not output it or wrote it on disk because I wanted to come here to After Effects first. Yes, I know this is like an airport. I'm sorry guys. I don't mean to have this noise outside. And so in After Effects, what we're going to do is to add a simple shine effect. With Trapcode Shine, our explosion looks like this. Now, of course, you can do a camera shake. You can do more particles if you want, 2D particles as well. Some other effects, but right now it looks pretty amazing. But what if you don't have After Effects? Well, you can add a read node. Just press letter R in Natron, and then it will read your image sequence. Now the good thing about this is that Natron is an open source compositor software. So yes, you can go to natron.fr. Well, the URL is longer, but if you type natron.fr like so, then you're going to get this amazing software. You'll install it, and it's an open source compositing application. Looks like Nuke, but it's got some other nifty features that will allow you to composite your renders, and it's free to download. I really like Natron. Remind me of my Nuke days when compositing. I do much of the composite, most of my works with After Effects, because once I dug really deep into the Nuke pipeline, I found out that everything that Nuke does on this era, it's possible also on After Effects. Not before. If you were talking about Nuke versus After Effects before 2015, yes, I would say kneel down, Nuke's got it all. But right now, with the multi-threading on After Effects, things have changed. Alright, enough history talk. Let's continue. Now, if you select your gut rays and merge them against your original image and place your merging with a additive node or additive mode actually, then you're gonna get gut rays on top of your image. Now we have to be very careful on how we're going to set this. And now let's set a keyframe. Right click, set keyframe, and then you go to your timeline, to the frame on your timeline where you would like to make the other changes, and as well it's going to be placed automatically on your timeline, as you can see it down there. Natron also has a dope sheet, because that's the reasoning, the normal reasoning on these softwares on how you do things. I do not agree with that as completely, but I know this is just the workflow. You just have to get accustomed. On any other software, you do have your timeline, and that timeline is the same dope sheet. We used to have that in Softimage as well, and Softimage also had a two-part, we can say that, workspaces environment. One for keyframes, one for dope sheets, and the dope sheet really was something that I have not seen on any other software. And yes, that goes for all the Maya users. Well, right now Maya is also a very good software. It has come a long way. Back in 2015, I was eager to wait for 2018, as Maya is right now, because I can really sincerely say that Maya now is a very powerful piece of software. It has included even the UV sculpting, which was a pretty new concept back at the time, 2015 I'm talking about. And Maya has included it very well with some nifty algorithms to smooth out UVs. So that between any other things like, I don't know, viewport performance and things. This is not a Maya talk, this is a Blender tutorial on how to do composite. How to composite a anime explosion. And so this is the end of it. Now you tweak here the values on your timeline and your dope sheet here on Natron, and you always get some grading options, and this flare onto the left gives it a nice touch. Alright, if you really like this tutorial, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to download the project files onto my website, and also for the next time we're going to review how to do this little nice wallpaper. Thank you very much.